everybody, welcome back to hashtag Fertility February 2019. I am sorry it's been a hot minute since the last time I uploaded a Fertility February video. It's been a little over a week, but I'm juggling preparing to move abroad with trying to make progress in my dissertation and life and just ugh. Also, I apologize if the lighting is a little off. It's a cloudy, gross day. It's the very beginning of spring in Georgia, and so we're getting some of the heat and the daffodils are blooming and all this wonderful stuff is happening, but at the same time, if you live in Georgia, you know, or at least the part of Georgia I'm at, in like northeast part of Georgia, it can rain a lot in the spring, like days and days on end of rain. And I get sinus pressure headaches every fucking time it rains. Drives me nuts. So I'm battling a headache right now, but we're gonna get through this because today's topic is incredibly important. It's something that touches close to home, especially for me as a Kentucky girl, because I'm going to talk a little bit about Kentucky and its recent education policies regarding abstinence-only sex education and how it kind of codified that into state education law, saying that abstinence before marriage and monogamy are what are the law of the land, basically. It's what's going to be taught as the norm to Kentucky children in public schools. And I'm a product of public school education in Kentucky. Yeah, and I support public education. I think it's a human right to have access to education, but in these really conservative, hardcore, fundamentalist Christian red states, like the states in the South, like states like Kentucky, the patriarchy and the homophobia and the Christian dogma kind of seeps into the public schools. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute, about my personal experience of what my sex education or lack thereof looked like when I was growing up in Kentucky, and how I think that is just, oh man, the feminist anger and rage is like boiling inside of me. But basically, this video is about what the fertility awareness method has taught me about consent, about communication in relationships with people and how important that is, and about how knowing more and having access to more knowledge about how my body works has helped me to feel empowered. It's helped me to feel confident in the choices I'm making as far as my sexual health, as far as my reproductive capacity and choosing not to use that capacity, which is next week. Well, actually this weekend I'm going to be sitting down with my partner and talking about that, how the fertility awareness method has affected our decision to be child-free and how we use it to be child-free. So stay tuned for that. That's coming out soon. And then the video after that will be the giveaway announcement. So stay tuned. Oh, by the way, I'll have up here in this corner linked, and also linked down below in the description box, the intro video for this year's Fertility February series. If you are interested in winning your own copy of this book, and this is the book that I use to teach myself the method, it is chock full of information about reproductive organs and how they work, how you can achieve or prevent pregnancy without the use of hormones, right? If you're interested in learning more about that, if you're interested in investigating and documenting your cycles and addressing some maybe health concerns you might have about that, check out that intro video linked below and up here in the corner in the cards, because I give specific instructions and information about how to enter the giveaway to win your copy of this book. I don't know if the thunder is picking up on camera, but the rains are coming back and my headache is raging on, but we're gonna push through. So I want to start off this video talking about consent and having access to proper sexual health education and information, how just important that is. So I'm going to be reading little portions of a newspaper article from Lexington, Kentucky, and that's about an hour and a half away from where I grew up. I kind of grew up in that space between Louisville and Lexington, for anybody who's familiar with Kentucky. This is from the Courier Journal, which is the newspaper in Lexington. Lexington, Kentucky, and Louisville, they're the two probably largest cities in the state of Kentucky, which doesn't really say much because Kentucky is still very rural state, very agricultural state, right? And so being the two little cities in Kentucky, there are little pockets of like, some Democrats might be there, so they're little purple, bluish purple pockets in a sea of red, right? That's partially to do with like all the universities that are in each city and all that. And so it's interesting that this article is published in the way it was in the Courier Journal. It probably would have been written a different way in a smaller town, in a more local Republican-led newspaper, but anyway. So I'll include the link to this article down below. This is from January 2018, and this is when a state representative, what is his name? State senator, so not like, you know, the senators in Congress, but State Senator Stephen Meredith of Litchfield, who's a Republican. He introduced Senate Bill 71 last year, which basically says that abstinence only and normalizing monogamy are must be taught as a core requirement for sexual health education in all public schools in the state of Kentucky. Problematic, right? So I'm just going to read the first few paragraphs and kind of skip around and share little bits of this article. Again, you can check out the link below in the description box if you want to read it for yourself. So Frankfort, Kentucky, which is the state capital, right? Atherton High School senior Sophia Letson-Eden said she has no objections to abstinence and monogamy being part of the public school sex education classes as called for in legislation pending in the General Assembly. But much more is needed, including discussions about sexual abuse, consent, contraception, and healthy relationships, says the high school senior Letson-Eden, speaking before a state Senate committee Thursday considering Senate Bill 71. Quote, "I hope you will join us in support of a comprehensive sex education program," said Letson-Eden, age 18, who appeared with 3 other women to speak against the bill sponsored by Senator Stephen Meredith, a Litchfield Republican. Instead, the Senate Education Committee approved the abstinence bill on a vote of 7 to 2, with 7 men on the committee voting for it. Dominique Olbert, a Lexington parent who testified against the bill, said she thought the makeup of the vote was telling, quote, "All the white males voted to support this," end quote. So this high school senior who was 18, a mother in Lexington, Dominique Olbert, testified against this, and even, let me skip ahead here, a Baptist minister, a woman Baptist minister, Reverend Lauren Jones Mayfield, a pastor at Highland Baptist Church in Louisville, said the bill's language doesn't address the reality of society. No shit. Where people are of different faiths and sexual orientations and have different views about sex outside of marriage. Quote, "This assumes sex is between a married man and woman in a Christian home," end quote, she said. Further, Mayfield said in her experience counseling women, efforts to promote abstinence and monogamy often end up shaming or blaming women for engaging in sex without such consequences for their male partners. But, let me skip back here. one of the proponents of the bill, Senator Danny Carroll, a Paducah Republican who voted in favor of it, said he believes it's important to require that abstinence and monogamy be included in sex education, arguing that societies that don't set standards are doomed to fail. If you want to check out the whole article, I'll link it below. But I wanted to start off with that because it kind of made national news, because here we have a state government putting into its education laws heteronormativity, teaching that monogamy and abstinence before marriage are the only acceptable ways, and therefore keeping important information away from children in public schools in Kentucky. And I was one of those kids, and I'll get into my story here in a second. I've ranted about it in other videos. I'll include a link to one here. It's the very first video I made on my channel about fertility awareness. I go into more detail in that video about my joke of a sexual health education in high school. But so you're teaching heteronormativity, saying that monogamy is the only right way when there's plenty of polyamorous, happy, healthy people and happy, healthy relationships with their partner or partners, right? So you're keeping information about the real world and about how diverse sexual relationships can be, right? And all of this is under the influence of a very right-wing, conservative Christian mindset, when there's supposed to be a separation of church and state, and it's maddening. And it just breaks my heart because I'm from Kentucky. I got long roots in Kentucky, especially eastern Kentucky and Appalachia. That's where my grandpa and all that part of the family were from. Look, I know Kentucky has problems. I know that it's one of the poorest states in the nation. I know that it has issues in terms of the opioid crisis and just fundamentalist Christianity just taking over all aspects of the government and society. I know it's a Republican stronghold and people use it as a synonym for Trump country and stuff. Right? And so Kentucky often becomes synonymous with backwards, with rednecks, with... It's like other states, I feel like probably people from Arkansas and Mississippi, Alabama, those kind of states that people who live maybe out west on the west coast or up in the northeast, they just kind of roll their eyes and give up on us. Those of us who live in these more conservative states with more poverty and, issues like that. But I'm still proud to be from Kentucky. I hate that places like Kentucky have become synonymous with backwardsness and, ignorance and poverty and Trump country and shit like that. I hate that. I hate that. But the reality of the situation is news stories like this that I just shared with you don't help the stereotype that people living in more privileged and more left-wing parts of the country have of people from here. Or people from places like Kentucky, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, stuff like that. And so that becomes super problematic because then the Democratic Party just gives up on the rural South and doesn't invest in the local politicians who are trying to change the narrative and trying to change the way things have been happening, trying to change the local politics. And, we saw that with the midterms with Stacey Abrams, who lost to an asshole Republican white dude governor in Georgia because, he cheated. Lots of voter restricting and targeting, African American neighborhoods in Atlanta and communities and keeping them from being able to vote and voter ID laws and shit. But also the Democratic Party, the headquarters of the Democratic Party didn't support Abrams like they should have, because they just give up the South. They just assume, oh, the South is a bunch of like ignorant Trump country rednecks. Sure. But actually, you know, probably some of the most radical political policies and social justice movements that this country has ever seen, like the civil rights movement, are rooted in the South. They happened in the South. The whole reason we talk about segregation and we talk about diversity and shit is because of like the sacrifices and the hard work of people in the South. You know? Anyway. But this video isn't necessarily about this. It's about how this very fundamentalist Christian, right-wing, conservative mindset has been seeping more and more, well, has seeped into things like public education, to where, you know, like I said, heteronormativity and Christian values are being taught at public schools. And so now is story time. Let me share my personal story in a nutshell. So I went to public school in Kentucky, and in my public high school, a Christian group, I think it's from one of the Methodist or the Baptist churches in my hometown, and there's a shit ton of churches in my hometown, but basically a Christian group sent a guy in, he was in his early 30s, to my health class to teach us abstinence-only sex education. And I put education in quotes because it was just chock full of misinformation. Basically, well, my health education was pitiful to begin with because our health ed teacher was the football coach, and he would basically just sit on his desk or sit at his desk reading the newspaper or like taking notes for the football game or whatever, like coming up with plays for the upcoming football game. And he would just say like, read chapter 2 and answer the questions at the back of the chapter to get your points for today. And so that's what we do, just sit there reading out of the textbook, this like dated, falling apart textbook, and answer the questions at the end of the chapter about whatever that chapter was about, nutrition or health or whatever, and just turn it into him. He wouldn't even read what we wrote. He would just put a check. It's like, okay, you got your points for that day. So that was my health education. And then on top of that, we had this Christian group come in, this guy representing this Christian group come in, teaching us abstinence only. And basically it was like a week-long class or 3 or 4 days of these people filling our minds with lies. Like, they taught us that condoms don't work and you can expect them to fail. They taught us that if Susie and Billy have sex, that means Susie has also had sex with all of Billy's previous partners, which is a lie, and it's sex shaming and slut shaming, and taught us to fear sex. They didn't teach us jack shit about how hormonal birth control works. There was no demonstration of condoms, like condom on a banana thing. None of that. Did not happen. We were just told they don't work. I think they made up some stupid statistic like they only work 70% of the time, and Lord knows where the hell they got that number, right? There was no mention of homosexuality. There was no mention of anything queer, like queer identity. There was no mention about healthy sexual relationships or even healthy relationships. There was no mention about what to do if you find yourself in a abusive situation or if you were sexually abused. Nothing. And then at the end of it, to really scare us into not having sex, they divided the boys and the girls and sent each group into a different classroom and then showed us horrific slides of pictures of genital warts and STIs and STDs that were just out of control, like horrific like really bad cases of genital warts and stuff. And they basically said, see, you see all these STDs and STIs? If you have sex before marriage, you will get those. So you better save yourself for your future partner, which reaffirms, saving yourself because that's what your partner deserves, is reaffirms this idea that your body doesn't fully belong to you. It belongs to your future partner, which for me, as a female, as a woman, means that my body doesn't belong to me, it belongs to my husband, and I need to save it and keep it clean and pristine for my husband, right? And then after that, as if that wasn't bad enough, at the end of it all, they had these little abstinence coins or rings. I think they had rings and coins. And you had to get up in front of the class to take your little coin or ring out of the little box that they had. So there was social pressure too, because if you were that one kid who sat at their desk and said, no, this is bullshit, and you refused to walk in front of the whole class and make a show to publicly make the commitment to save yourself for marriage or whatever, then you would have gotten slut shamed. Or the other kids in the class would have made fun of you. Even though I knew several people in my class who were sexually active. Everybody got up to get the coin or whatever. And so it was manipulative. It was full of misinformation. They didn't teach us jack shit about anything when it comes to like preventing pregnancy or how hormonal birth control works or how the menstrual cycle works. Nothing. Like nothing. And now that Bill 71 or whatever it was that Senator Meredith wanted to pass, it was approved. I don't know if it's been enacted yet, but the Committee of Education or whatever the hell it was called, all the dudes, all the men, all the white men on that committee voted in favor of it. All the Republicans basically made slut shaming and misinformation and Christian values law, state law. And oh my God, that's just so, it fills me with so much rage. So much rage. So much rage. Oh my God. So much rage, for real. Just thinking about just how many young people's minds are not going to be properly prepared for adult life, for sexual relationships, for relationships in general, whether they are monogamous or polyamorous or whatever. It's just, you're setting up so many people to have to learn this shit through porn, or to have misconceptions about sex and misconceptions about how relationships work and misconceptions about communication in relationships and how important that is. And this all leads to the very important, crucial issue of consent. I was in high school, I graduated high school in 2006. So this is largely before social media. This is way before Me Too became a national catchphrase. I know the work of Me Too was already going on, but it didn't become a thing until like 2015. It had become part of the national consciousness until then, right? So this is way back in the early 2000s, like 12, 13 years ago. And if you grow up in a small rural town like I did, you are sheltered from a lot, right? And so, I was also raised Roman Catholic, but growing up in that really Christian area, I had friends and I was surrounded by people who were fundamentalists, Seventh-day Adventists, Evangelicals, Baptists, Methodists, Southern Baptists, First Baptists, like all of that. And so it was a very patriarchal and homophobic situation as well. And so I was never told, either from the people in my church, from my own parents, from my pitiful sexual health education in school, I was never told it was okay to say no to a man. Actually, I was reinforced with the idea that your body belongs to the man. It belongs to your husband. First it belongs to your father, and then through marriage, your father kind of sells you off to be the property of your husband. And sure, it wasn't put to me exactly in those words, but that was the subtext, you know what I mean? That was in the environment that I grew up in. And when it comes to consent, I think it's a basic thing to let your children know, especially if you have daughters or if you have children who present themselves as more feminine, on the feminine end of the spectrum. It's incredibly important to let them know that they have a right to say no to a man or to a masculine presenting person. And to let them know that they have autonomy over their bodies. And to let them know that it's okay to seek sexual pleasure as long as it's in a consenting situation among consenting adults. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody's on board. You got your safe word if you're in a situation where you need a safe word. All of that. And just like with fertility awareness, when I didn't discover this until I was 29, I feel like I didn't learn all of this about consent and communication and autonomy about my body until I was already in my mid to late 20s. And that's a crime. That's a crime because I found myself in abusive relationships. I found myself in situations where men were pressuring me to have sex without a condom because I deserve full feeling, is what he told me. That happened to me twice, by the way. I feel like I had to swim against the current in order to inform myself about A, how my own fucking cycles and body work, and B, to inform myself about my right to really practice autonomy with my body. And when it comes to communication, well, my current relationship right now with my partner, with my husband, is incredibly healthy. It's the healthiest relationship I've ever had, and that's probably why I married him. But communication is so big in our relationship, especially with something like the fertility awareness method, because since I'm not just taking hormonal birth control, that means I have to let him know when it is safe for us to have sex without a barrier method, without a condom, or when he has to put on a condom unless he wants us to have an accidental baby, which is exactly what we were trying to avoid, right? And so just that basic fact that I have to tell him, I'm the one telling him, no, you're putting on a condom. It feels so empowering. I mean, it was his idea for me to quit taking birth control. And check out the intro video that I linked up here and linked down below. Ooh, there's some lightning outside. If you want to understand my nuanced beliefs and approaches to hormonal birth control, because I'm not... That was the goddess saying, preach, girl, preach. I'm not totally against hormonal birth control. It's just I was miserable taking it, and so my partner actually encouraged me to stop taking it. And he voluntarily put on the condom and stuff, right? But anyway, I feel like just that basic fact that I have to communicate with my partner exactly what part of my cycle I am in and what is the risk of pregnancy and all that jazz, it makes me so sad to think that in some relationships, even that kind of basic level of communication doesn't happen. And the issue of communication can expand even further. I mean, we are still, as femmes and women, we are still socialized. Preach, girl, preach. That's the goddess telling me to preach. We are still socialized to think that the man's, the penis wielder's pleasure and orgasm is more important than our own. That is starting to change, but I grew up, I was born in the 80s, y'all. Like, I remember what the world was like before we had the internet and, you know, access to more information and all that kind of stuff, you know. These conversations, thanks to social media and thanks to the internet presence of like people fighting the good fight and doing feminist work and all that kind of stuff, social justice work, thankfully these kinds of conversations and topics are starting to reach the general populace, but there's still a lot of resistance to it. And so a lot of people are still socialized to think that the man's pleasure is more important. Oh my God! That was like right outside my window. Oh my God, I caught that on camera. I forgot what the fuck I was saying. Oh my God, that was frightening. Oh, we still have electricity though. That's good. Anyway, the ultimate message of this video is this before lightning strikes me down. Maybe that's the Christian God trying to take me down because I'm talking trash about his religions. But the ultimate point of this video is having access to proper, well-rounded, non-heteronormative, non-patriarchal, non-sexist sexual health education is utterly important because it gives people access to knowledge about how their own bodies work, about how reproduction works, about how contraception works. I lost power for a second. And it empowers them. Knowledge is power. Okay? I feel so much more well-rounded when it comes to my knowledge about my body. I feel so much more healthy. I feel more confident in my body and my sexuality. I understand that my pleasure is just as important as my husband's. I understand that my body is mine. It doesn't belong to him. This isn't a property exchange. This is a partnership, right? And the fertility awareness method has been just a crucial, essential source of power for me. Knowledge is power. Okay, before the Lord strikes me down, let me end this video. Bye.